But I don't want to delay time anymore. We've had a speaker from Ukraine tackling the crisis management. We had from Latvia, and now we'll have a story from United Kingdom. And our next speaker is the Vice President of the Cyber Technology Risk at Qualys, and he's the leader in cloud-based security and compliance. And today he's going to tell his story of weak signals. It's a very interesting story of how a little small hint afterwards proved to be very important to learn some major lessons in visibility and resilience. So, Mr. Ivan Milenkovic, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. It is time to act. The words of Richard Horne, Chief Executive of the UK's Cybersecurity Centre. The words that are basically the highlight of the latest NCSC report that was published only 2 weeks ago. In the same report, Dan Jarvis, who is the Minister for Security, openly states that basically everybody needs to do something because there's an imminent threat to national security and economic health. If we try to unpack why they're saying those things, actually it's very simple. Julia was kind enough to put a few slides relevant to the UK on a screen, so I don't have to. And basically we all know, we all saw those stories. JLR, Marks and Spencer, the story goes on and on and on. There is something rather interesting, however, about all of those incidents. What's interesting is, when you think about it, there is no sophistication, there's no complex AI, there are no crazy exploits. No. All of the incidents we experienced, at least all of the very high-profile incidents that we experienced in the UK this year, were rather simple, in some shape or form, involving people. Now, why that doesn't surprise me? Been there, done that. My name is Ivan Milenkovic. I'm a recovering CISO. Until 2 years ago, I was a group CISO of a company with more than 140,000 people across 60 countries. It was my job to try to prevent those things, many times successful, few times not as successful as it could have been. But nonetheless, I'll try to tell you a story that hopefully sheds some light into what and whys and how, and eventually, hopefully, how you don't repeat those mistakes. I'm going to take you back to 2003. Very interesting year for so many reasons. 2023, some of you might remember, was a year where there was some interesting news in the press. Hive was taken down. You might remember, might not. Nonetheless, at the beginning of 23, my team and I were very confident that we had full control over our estate. Before that, we had 2 relatively large incidents. We came out of them with plenty of lessons learned. We came out of them relatively unscarred. We did some great improvements. We thought we had the ultimate visibility over our sea. But something was lurking, something that at the time we were not aware of, something that almost changed our lives. And I really mean it because 2023 was the year where the company that I mentioned was about to be acquired. And it was something that everybody was expecting. It was something that everybody had their eyes on. We had many, many very important clients. Obviously, we had some very, very eager buyers waiting to buy us. What happened? So, again, 2023. Funnily enough, Julia mentioned it. Friday afternoon. It's always Friday. Don't ask me why. Phone call. Someone with a relatively heavy European accent says, I paraphrase, "Hi, I'm from Europol. We did some arrests and we confiscated some IT equipment. And on that equipment, we believe that we found some of your data. Ooh, what do you mean? But questions start popping up. Some of our data. No, wait. Who are you? Do I know you? Is this some sort of a hoax? Is this someone who's actually trying to do something there and then? How do we validate that that person is really who they say they are? So we go through this crazy process. We scramble. We try to, basically, we politely close the call and say, we'll get in touch. We try calling and contacting our contact in law enforcement. We try to figure out whether such person really exists. Can we somehow get to speak with them? And at the end, we succeed. There really was such a person, still is. He did answer the phone, and he did tell us what they believed they had. And basically, my blood went cold, because according to that description, they had almost entire dump of our Active Directory. So imagine a scenario where you're convinced everything's okay. You have full control over your environment. You understand, at least you understand, what's there, how it works, whatever. And yet someone claims that they have gigabytes of your data. So the story started unfolding. By the way, an interesting stat, 227 days, 9 months. That's what typically, if you want, on average, how long it takes companies to basically figure out that they got breached. Now, luckily, that wasn't our stat. Our stat was something different, but we had effectively only days to scramble and figure out what and how. And, you start thinking how it happened. How did they get in? Where do we start? Something is happening. Someone's already exfiltrated a big chunk of our data. Is there anything else? What do we do? Because time's ticking, we have that acquisition that's imminent. As I said, we have some very important clients. Where do you go from there? Luckily, 3 weeks before that, so it was not 9 months, 3 weeks before that, one of my guys came to me with, there's something strange, and I'd like your opinion on. Okay? Basically, he said, I noted a very strange DNS request going out, not to one of our DNS servers, but going out to an open DNS server. And I said, okay, can it be some sort of a misconfiguration? Is it something that, you want to look at? He said, I'd really like to investigate because that request came from the server that we don't know anything about. We don't have it on our EDR. We don't have it in our asset management. We don't have it anywhere. Oops. What a story. So luckily for us, I told him, you know what, great job, stay on it, try to figure out what's going on, and let me know if you come up with anything else. So of course, this thing happened, and I recall the conversation that happened 3 weeks before that. So I went back to him with, can you tell me more? Where is this thing? What does it do? We started unpacking all of those things, and actually turned to be far worse than what I initially thought. Very quickly, we found our patient zero. And it's one of those stories that you sort of hope it's not going to happen to you, but nonetheless, every now and then you experience it. Human factor, as I said. So we had this small contracting company doing some network maintenance for us. And this guy, bless him, great guy, for probably a good couple of years before that, providing service to us, no problems whatsoever. He went off sick. He ended up in a hospital for a couple of days. But he really wanted to do his job. He loved his job. So he didn't take his work laptop. He took his own personal device. And given that he had almost full control over all of our network egress points, he made a bit of a shortcut for himself. I appreciate why. Sometimes we just want to get on and do our job. So he made a shortcut for himself, shortcut that went straight through the firewall, no MFA, nothing of sorts, straight access directly to the very core of our network. Yes, we did find out, of course, that that very device he used was compromised. We did discover a few other things as well along the way, but again, one of those things that you hope it's never going to happen to you, nonetheless. So I did mention Hive. Yes, it was them, and yes, they did use that device basically as a proxy into our network. Luckily for us, they did not know where they ended up. Nonetheless, the game was on. I guess very convenient, and in a spirit of the conference, the chess game started, and it was a tough one. It was a tough one because we tried to figure out what else they had. We tried to figure out how far they got. We tried to figure out what their objectives were. I'm not sure if we have any guys from Mandiant in the room. They're certainly at a conference. Credits to them. I'm not paid for this, but at the time, they were my instant response provider. Thanks to them, we did manage to basically tame the beast and do some of those things. But it was quite an interesting story. We were basically following for a month and a half, give or take, every single step. We see they try to exfiltrate something. We basically allow first 100, 200 bytes, then we kill it. They use an account. We slowly strip that account of any elevated privileges, make it first normal user account, then pretty much just a dummy account, then we kill it. As I said, it was going on and on and on. They make a step, we make a step. We corner them, we slowly figure out what's happening. We ran the biggest patching exercise in the history of the company. One of those things where, you know, sometimes you're too cautious, you want to test things, you want to figure out whether you're going to bring down any of your production services. We did it at a scale that I could not even imagine, but we did not bring a single production service down. We managed to reset almost every single password in the company, 140,000 people, mind you. Not a single service went down. Basically, we were, you know, cleaning our own ocean of what was there and doing it in a way that we had to come up on top. We simply could not afford that any of our clients' data got out. So as I said, that thing lasted a month and a half or so. And once we were absolutely certain, we understood where they were. We understood which accounts were used by them. We understood where they tried to exfiltrate things and the fact that they didn't have anything else. We said, you know what, game over. There and then we cut all the access. It was a very, again, coordinated thing across the board because we knew something might come out of it. We already knew that some portion of data was exfiltrated. We thought we had a very decent idea of what it was. We thought we could handle it. And so we did. Now, something I would really like you to think hard about. Something that was our biggest takeaway from that entire situation. Mind you, it wasn't our first rodeo, Effectively, it was my third big incident in that particular role. But nonetheless, when it comes to your cyber controls, coverage, configuration, capability. For any control that you have in place, you need to know that you do cover every single endpoint, every single possible entry point, all of your estate. If you don't, your control is not effective. Configuration. Obviously, you might have the best coverage in the world, but on the example of EDR, if someone says, you know what, there's too much of a risk, we can actually bring production service down or whatever, and if you have that thing configured in fail open, it's not good. Last but not least is the capability itself. Is the control itself good? Does it actually remediate the risk that you're trying to handle there? I'm telling you this because in our case, we basically failed on all three. In terms of coverage, there was a range of servers that we simply didn't know about. Not trying to make an excuse, we were a very acquisition-hungry company, so it was one of those things where that was effectively part of the legacy estate that nobody ever reported. Hence, my SOC didn't know about it. In terms of the configuration, we allowed someone to change it without going through any sort of decent process around it, and it was for the sake of convenience. So how do you make sure that doesn't happen to you? And last but not least, capability. Thinking about capability, yeah, we lacked the capability to see what was going on in our own environment. We were extremely lucky. Single phone call changed probably the whole course of what happened there, but nonetheless. So think about those things very hard. The moral is very simple. If you don't know about it, you can't protect it. It's really as simple as it gets. This isn't about sophisticated tools. This isn't about sophisticated exploits. This isn't about sophisticated whatever. This was one of those attacks that didn't take almost any proper effort. It was a simple slip up. So my question to you is, how big is your ghost fleet? Do you really understand everything that you have in your environment? Do you have the right visibility? Can you, at any given point in time, look around and say, yep, we're confident, what we monitor is what we have, and we really have a very good view of what's happening there. I'm going to leave you with this. Be an active sonar operator. Whoever came up with curiosity killed the cat, I would say to them, go away, don't speak anymore, because curiosity is one of those things that first and foremost saved us, and secondly, it's one of those qualities that I always look for when it comes to who I work with, who I'm going to employ. Curiosity is one of those fundamental qualities when it comes to cybersecurity. Never stop being curious. Map your entire ocean. Try to understand what's there. Try to understand whether there's anything, for whichever reason, that can basically slip under your radar. My big lesson learned from this one is, from that point on, I truly stopped believing any sort of report that comes from a human. I stopped believing that if someone has to gather data from whatever and put it in an Excel and gives it to me and says, this is where we stand, I don't trust it. I only ever now trust reports that are coming directly from the systems without any chance for subjectivity. when it comes to the state of my controls, when it comes to the coverage of my controls, when it comes to the capability of my controls. Leave the 3C. Leave the mantra of coverage, configuration, capability. Once again, thank you very much for your time. It was a true pleasure to be here with you. If you have any questions, you'll be able to find me here, outside, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much. Really teaching lessons learned story. So are there any questions here from the audience directly? Please raise your hand, if any. If not, we do have one question online. And it's basically about communication. During the whole process, were the clients and your partners informed about the risk?
Fantastic question, Dana. Absolutely. As I said, that wasn't our first rodeo. We did learn some very important lessons beforehand. So in this particular instance, the attack came into one specific site we had. We figured out which were the clients hosted on that particular site. The communications went out the very moment that happened. I did have to keep my entire management abreast of what was happening because, as I said, we were in a very peculiar situation. The negotiations were going on. They had to know whether we are basically handling the situation properly because a big incident that affected us badly, either in terms of the services we were providing or maybe leaking some client data or whatever, would ultimately end that entire process, and we would probably suffer quite a lot after that. So yes, we did communicate. As a matter of fact, we over-communicated possibly, but in the right way. And at the end of the day, third big incident there, first two I had our CEO almost on every single call. That incident, we were in a situation where I was told, only tell me if there is something that I really need to worry about. So,
yeah. So that drives me to the next question. When you had the first call or the first DNS find about the ping, and you understood that there might be something wrong, which was the hardest part in finding the patient zero and how it was done, or convincing the CEO and the board of directors this is where we should invest and dig deep?
That's a very interesting question as well. Look, I wouldn't say there was a more important or harder one. By that time, we really had what I now believe was a very good, very mature process. So that was just one of those things where we had separate streams. As I said, my guys did start investigate what happened with that DNS thing that led us to basically that particular site. We were then able to cross-reference some of the stuff. Maybe a whole week after that phone call, we did manage to get hold of some screenshots of the data that Europol had, and we figured out basically there are some interesting pointers guiding us directly to that site. But nonetheless, by that time, we already knew because we were able to figure out where that server was, and we were able to trace everything back. So yeah, it was just one of those things, but not something that I wish anybody else has to experience.
Yeah, and so thank you so much for being brave and sharing your experience, and thank you for coming to Cyber Story and Cyber Chess in general to share this with us. And here you have also learned some nice socks. As you see, you are like
huge
yeah,
fun.
Exactly. you can definitely appreciate this. So thank you so much again for your presentation. I hope to see you definitely
Thank
all
you
the
very
other
much.
conferences
Thank you
as well.